All right. Well, next up, we have Marissa Kranis. She is the VP of Social Marketing at Salesforce. And we're going to talk a little bit here on building event complementary social media strategies. Marissa, thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So, I mean, there's so many ways we could sort of dig into this. I think maybe we'll all start with just as the leader of the social team at Salesforce, maybe talk a little bit about your role and how that fits into the broader marketing function.
Yeah, so Salesforce Social really is across the entire company. We have social in all different places, but we've created a centralized center of excellence that owns a majority of our channels, but also really thinks about how we're pushing social out to our employees, how we're looking at community management, crisis comms, operations, analytics. So we have a very large scale kind of thing that we're working on across social media. And then one of our biggest and best elements of that, and where I actually came from, was the events world. So we do have a focus on Salesforce events as well.
I mean, you can't think about Salesforce without thinking about Dreamforce. I mean, Salesforce really sort of reimagined what B2B and SaaS events can be like. So obviously Salesforce does events really, really well. Let's talk about what it's like to plan content and social content around that. How do you get the word out? Where does that start? How does it evolve over time? Kind of unpack that a little bit for us.
Okay, so let me just say, I actually came to Salesforce as an MBA intern in product marketing for Service Cloud. So I have a heart in Service Cloud from way back. And it was a summertime, so every one of the interns was working on Dreamforce. So when I had the opportunity to come back to Salesforce to work specifically on events in Dreamforce, I was like, heck yes. This is where the magic happens. This is really where we're showcasing our brand to the entire world, and not just our brand, our humanity and who we are, not just as a company, but as human beings within the company. And so I'm a huge Salesforce events fan. Even having moved into more of an overall brand role, I find that Salesforce is not only looking at how do we showcase our products, but how do we, again, showcase who we are. And then also, how do we bring people together? When I think about events in general, and especially social media, I think about three key pillars, and that's awareness, education, and community. Awareness can really, depending on where you are at in terms of your event strategy and how big your events are. At Salesforce, I'm going to be honest with you, we don't always need to focus as much on getting demand gen. We are going to fill the room no matter what. So awareness is really, how do we take that beyond the in-person event, make that broader, make that virtual, and then how do we actually create something that's beyond, oh, this is the tech event, because it really is so much more.
Yeah.
And then education, and that's a two-prong, and that really comes up in the pre, during, and post as well. Is first, pre, like Dreamforce is huge. It can be a little bit overwhelming. And how do we educate people so they're able to make the most of their time at the event? If you come in without an understanding of what you're trying to take away, who you're trying to meet with, what kind of sessions you want to go to, you're going to be lost. Honestly, it could be very overwhelming. So we're educating people beforehand on how to make the most out of your systems. And then community. Salesforce is definitely a community-driven company as well. One of my favorite things. I've been at the company now over 10 years, and I'd say that that's what is the big thing that keeps me here, is not only the employees at Salesforce, but this entire community of trailblazers that we have. And it's pre-event, it's really, how do we connect them? So when they get to the event, let's say they're going solo, how do they have relationships with other people in the community that can help them along within their Dreamforce journey? And then how do we not only showcase these individuals that are doing amazing things with Salesforce, but how do we help them bring others in and create an even bigger and more inclusive community?
Engagement and community really sort of seems to be the summary of what you just said, right? Which is so important and so evident in so much of Salesforce's social sort of strategy and implementation. I want to ask you about sort of pre, during, and post-event strategies, right? And so like before an event happens, it's how do you what are some best practices for building hype, for getting people excited, whether it's about getting people registered or just getting people engaged, before the event even begins?
Yeah, absolutely. We do start, more than 100 days out. And I will be honest, we're consistently on that road to Dreamforce. Everything that we do, all of our product launches, all of our other events, connections, Trailhead DX, World Tour, is really all about being on that road to Dreamforce. And so social is obviously a huge part of all of those events leading up. I think one of the biggest things and one of my biggest tips is really take your partnership with your cross-functional partners and stakeholders very seriously. We have such close relationships with our demand gen teams, with our creative teams, with our operations teams, with everyone that's actually running activations on the ground. So we're not only able to showcase what they are on social beforehand, we're really set up for success for that during experience. And so going back again, awareness, education, community, pre-event, we're showcasing who's going to be speaking, what's going to be on the ground, how is it going to be the most magical event ever via social. We're also having a lot of fun. You'll see that especially on our Dreamforce handles, is that we're really engaging the audiences where they are. If that means that they're on Threads, if they're on Instagram, if they're on Twitter, if they're on LinkedIn, we're finding them, we're having fun with them. We're putting out memes, we're creating video content, and we're really engaging. Again, community engagement is so big to making sure people are excited and hyped up for the event. And again, as noted, education. We don't want people to show up and not know where to go.
Right. Well, I mean, too often I think with B2B, like we take ourselves too seriously, and the personality.
Oh God, I know.
Yeah, the personality that Salesforce has overall in the overall Salesforce brand is just so great and so refreshing, and to see that across the social platforms as well. During the event itself, like what are some of your best practices for getting and keeping people engaged, especially knowing that there are now more and more channels, right? I mean, this even before we even started this conversation, I think Threads didn't even exist from Facebook. So how do you do that during the event?
Well, first of all, we have an amazing team and amazing agency support. And so again, it really is pre-planning a lot. So we have war rooms beforehand. I hate that word actually. So we just have like happiness temps. Let's say that feels like a lot better. But we're planning everything. We're building out every schedule. And we're using our publishing partners as well, Sprout, to make sure that everything is planned appropriately. And I'd say during it as well, we're thinking about, we are so in touch even with like our Black Ops or our like crisis comms, making sure that we're connected to all of those cross-functional partners. We do have to think about the platform separately, right? So LinkedIn, you're not going to be posting every 5 seconds. While Twitter and I guess Threads, you can do a little bit more of that. But we also, again, it comes back to that community management. For me, it also comes back about thinking about that this is actually, at least Dreamforce, can be considered 2 separate events. It's that in-person experience and that's the virtual experience. So in person, we're really making sure we have social first activations offsite. And again, this comes back to that close relationship with our event planners, where we can actually build in social to activations across the campus. We're getting that time with speakers, with trailblazers to collect content in person as well. Creating some surprise and delight moments. And of course, we have a community management team that is answering every question. Where's the bathroom? We've got you within 5 seconds, and we are providing you that information. And thinking about that virtual experience, it's also a lot of the same thing, but just thinking about it a little bit different. So what are those online social first experiences? Can we get them to print out something? Can we do a bingo card? And it is that, again, that community management and engagement. And social streaming is a big one. So where are we streaming our big keynotes, our fun moments, and how are we sharing those experiences on site and having them be leveraged for our virtual audience?
All right, we got just about a minute left, but I want to ask you about post-event strategy. So a lot of people think about pre-event, getting people excited, during event, getting people, and too often after the event, we moved on to the next thing. Like, what are your post-event best practices for repurposing content and keeping that community engaged?
I thought you were going to ask me what's my like post-event plan myself, and it's oftentimes to sleep.
Nap. Yeah, no, it's always nap. Yeah, absolutely.
But I would say that the biggest thing is that these events are content creation machines. So we are building so much content on site that we can utilize for years to come. We can use clips from keynotes. I still sometimes will go back to keynotes from years past and be like, what is the best snippet that we can use? Lots of clips, not posting your full videos, the hour-long videos, but finding those really magic moments within the keynotes and reposting those and linking out to that longer form. Wrap-up blogs are always great. And then continuing the engagement and asking for those look-backs from the community. So it's a lot of reutilization of content and how you can make it new and how you can have it lead to your biggest announcements and product development.
So great. So much to unpack there. Marissa Kranis, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing so much about what you're doing in social at Salesforce.
Thank you so much, Matt.